Is it audible to everyone? Yes, yeah. Okay, let's continue. Right, fine. So here, now we are using a subscribe method. Subscribe method is used to execute asynchronous, right? Now the same thing we have to do with another method is there. What is it? This dot getter, we have a get products. Get products and subscribe. We have to read every product, and this dot products is equal to whatever the product. That means we are reading every product from the collection and it is defined. And very important is this is by default JSON. It automatically converts the data into JSON. Whereas in fetch method, we have to manually convert. Here we don't need that. Directly data is in a JSON. Now we need to present this data in the UI. The same thing. Now let's go HTML. In the HTML, this is simple, same. So here we will create a container, just roughly how to present with all the effects you know. I will just use a select. Here I want to generate all the categories list. So we will give a heading, categories, and we need to create an option, and this should repeat. NG for LET item of what is it? Categories. And we need to present the item. That means all the categories information must be here. So you can see all the categories information must be displayed there. It is working fine. This time we are accessing the data and we are handling the data from API using a service. So what is advantage now is in any component, you just need this to happen. Am I right? You just have to inject. And you can access those methods by using subscribe. You can execute. We can get the data and store locally in the references. Any component we can just inject and we can use. You can have multiple service. For example, suppose you see I'm using another, I want to display the products list, products just roughly here. We will create a table. You can use a card class, some table hover like this. In T head, I am configuring row heading. I will put a title and I will put a preview like this. And here in the table body, this row should repeat. NG for LET item of collection. Collection is what? Products. Products, and here we are defining the cell where we have to get item title. In the second cell, we have to define item dot image. We'll put an image. Image will have src, and that src will be item dot image. So width, so and height. So this is simple presentation of data, and you can see we can access and present the data here. This time we are fetching information from API, not by using fetch method, by using HTTP client. Here, currently we are watching only get. If you have to handle post, then you must have that API with you. That means you need to create one API which can handle both get and post. To handle post, we have to learn how to post the data. To post the data, you need a form. So in Angular, working with forms is again a big concept. That means in Angular, you have to learn how to design forms, how to create forms. Why we need the forms? For fetching the data and for posting the data. We will see how to post. We have seen just how to get. But in order to post, you need API which is ready to collect your data and insert into database. Second, you need a form in the front end to communicate with the API to post the data. And Angular forms are little different. In Angular, we have separate forms concept, forms, validations. After learning that only you can use post. So I will show you how to post after knowing about the concept of forms, working with forms. Initially, we are testing only one request. What is that request? Get. Right? You can have multiple services. Multiple services means, see, already here we are using data service. I want to use capture service. You can inject any number of services. Just you have to put a comma, private. Another one is what? Capture. It is of what type? Capture service. That's it. Right? Then you want that random code. Then you know you need a code which is a string type. Initially it is empty. Now on initialization, what we do? This dot code is equal to this dot capture. Capture have a generate code method. Generate code is an ordinary method. It is not any asynchronous method. So it is going to just execute and return the data here. We need to display that somewhere. I will put a heading here, some categories. So here I will just put that code here. And you can see it is going to generate a random code here. It is going to generate a random code. We created a service for generating random code. It is going to display that random code here. You can inject any number of services into it. Later we have to do that. We need lot of services. That means for generally what we do is for manager data, one service. For employee data, another service. For customer data, another service. We have to create different services because all service methods we don't put at one place. We will create multiple services, we inject them into component and we use them. Right? So here we have created the data service to communicate with these API. Suppose I want to access data from NASA API, use the data and handle that same. In this itself, you can create another method or you can create a separate service. You can create a separate service, you can fetch and you can handle it, right? So depending on the requirement, you can have multiple services. And now important is, yesterday already I told you this provider is important. If you don't define provider for any service, then you have to configure the provider compulsory. You have to configure the provider at least in the app module providers. For example, see now, the data service is not using the provider. Data service is not using the provider. Same, capture service is also not using the provider. That means the provider is not defined for both the services. Then obviously both services cannot work here. You can see when I inspect and I can see here in the console, you can see both services, provider is missing. There is no provider for those services. So you can configure them in the app module providers. Here we can import the capture service. Here we can import the data service, data service, data service. We can import both of them. Now you can configure in this way, then you can see again these two are working fine. Working fine. Now what is the difference? Already we discussed that. That means this is eager loading. This is eager loading. Eager loading means it will load these services and keep ready for application. Even you are not using, they are in the memory. That means you are unnecessarily injecting and loading them because provider looks for them in the memory. But sometimes we want some services to get ready at the time of loading application. After loading application, we want to use those in other locations. In that case, we define here, right? Why you have a provider's option in app module? Because some services need to get ready before you start using any component. Before the component is created, if a service need to get ready, in that case, you have to configure in providers. Otherwise, you can better just give the provider related information in the service itself here. Right? If you define it both locations, you are overloading. That is wasting the memory. It doesn't matter. It will not have any problem. But you are overloading. That means it will load again when it is requested by the component. That's not required. Only one enough. Either here or there. So technically, what is the point here? Another question is why to configure services in app module, in app.module.ts. Why to configure services in app module? So to initialize service at the time of loading application, or you can say at the time of bootstrapping. At the time of bootstrapping, if you want to initialize the service, then you have to configure that in app module, so that service is ready before the component is ready. So here another point is why to configure provider. How it is done? Here we have to go to providers. In the providers is an array. In this array, we need to define some CAPTCHA service, or we have to define some data service. Like this, we need to define. Right? So why to configure in the module? Already I told you. How to, yesterday itself we discussed. In the component itself, how to configure it. So now example is this. What we have done is, this is data.service.ts. In data.service.ts, this is the logic. Here we will put directly provided in what root here. Now I will copy this. This is the data service. This is the data service file. Now we need to use this service in any component. Then we have to use API demo.component.ts. Here in this we have to inject. In that we have to inject, and we need to execute by using a subscriber. Next, presentation same. API demo.component.html. This is the presentation. So presentation is same, nothing special here. We are injecting both the service and we are using them here. This is a HTTP client service, right? Now, what is difference between client service and fetch? I told you, right? Now, how to handle posts? Get okay. That means we are fetching the data and doing this. Now, the question, how do we post the data? But in order to post the data, generally we post the data through a form. That means we need to learn Angular forms. If we know Angular forms, we can learn how to post the data, how we can get post. Not only post, to modify, to delete, we need to design the forms. So now Angular forms are different. That means Angular provides two types of forms. We have template driven forms, model driven forms, right? What is difference between them, when to use them, and how to handle validations in the forms. These are the major that we'll see tomorrow, right? In tomorrow, we will discuss forms concept. Once we are done with forms, you will be perfect in forms and validations. Then we can learn how to post data to API. We will learn end-to-end example, get, post, and other actions, how to perform, right? Tomorrow we'll see that, right? How do we work with forms?